rugby player. Now, a slightly unusual beer is being served in the medieval town of Conwy this weekend. It's called Conwy Confusion and has been made using hops grown by residents of the town in their own gardens. One of the people who's been lovingly tending his hop plants is our reporter Chris Dearden, who lives in Conwy. We sent him on a journey to find out what happened to his hops after he'd picked them.
Now, it's not very often that I get to report on something that's happening in my own back garden. But then again, it's not very often that my wife comes home and says she's met someone in the pub who gave her a few unusual plants. Thankfully, these are legal. They're hops. I confess I've never really taken a particularly close look at a hop plant before we started growing them here. They're basically climbing up our garden fence in quite a dense mass of bright green leaves. The stalks are actually quite rough and prickly like raspberries, and peeking out from in between the leaves are greeny white flowers. And today's job is to pick those flowers. Rather a lot of green fly on these. I hope that's not going to be a problem. Better wash them off first. The story of why we've been growing our own hops in our back gardens starts in this pub, the Albion in Conwy. It's run by 4 local breweries, and a random conversation here between one of the regulars and one of the brewers came up with the idea that people in Conwy could have a go at growing hops. So the hops were bought and handed out and planted in around 20 different gardens around the town. There's no money in it, none of us are being paid, so why would anyone want to grow hops in their back garden? I've come to meet fellow hop grower Tony Franks a few blocks away.
The hops are all grown down there, and we have had strings running across the entire place to those uprights here with festoons of hops hanging down.
So you actually did a proper, Ken's hop garden with little bits of wire and strings for them to go up?
That's right. Yeah, we got, if you think of a standard bucket, probably about 2 buckets full this year.
When somebody came to you and said, do you fancy growing hops, what did you think? Because it's not really a crop you'd associate with this part of the world.
No, it isn't. We've been very keen at the independent breweries locally, supporting local businesses. And I think part of that hop growing thing, we felt like we could be part of it in a small way.
There must be, I suppose, a certain pride factor in taking a swig of beer and thinking, I helped make that.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, I mean, especially as it's hopefully going to taste reasonably good.
So, how does the beer taste? Well, it's time to head into the Conwy brewery and see what they've done with our hops. The beer's being put into bottles and into casks ready for the big weekend. Head brewer Gwyn Thomas says that our hops got made into a sort of tea.
What we did with this particular beer, the green hop beer, is we actually made what we call a hop tea with the hops, which is steep them in hot water to extract all the flavours and the aromas from the hops, and then we added it to a beer that we already had. So we did it that way. Because there weren't enough hops to do a big brew, then we had to sort of use our imagination and essentially extract the flavour a different way. So we made a tea with the hops and then added that to the beer.
So while the beer was fermenting, you were putting our hops into these tanks to get the flavour out?
That's right, yeah, that's right. We were sort of using the hop tea to sort of impart the flavour into the beer.
From your point of view, what's the attraction of taking part in something like this? Why get involved?
It's just something that's actually a bit interesting as a brewer to do, because the thing is, I didn't really get into brewing beer to make sheds loads of money or anything like that. It was actually sort of the passion of the actual brewing the beer and brewing different types of beers. And this means that if you can get hold of the green hops, then it means you can actually do a different type of beer again. And also working with the community, we've got strong connections in Conwy, and obviously we're a Conwy brewery as well. I lived in Conwy for many, many years. I think it's fantastic that the community have actually done this, because it's something different for them to get involved with. They get involved in the beer making process in a way right at the start.
Back at the Albion pub in Conwy, the beer's now arrived. It's called Conwy Confusion, and it's described on these tasting notes here as a delicious dark amber ale with a grassy hop aroma. Now, we may not have been paid for this, but growing hops does have one small benefit. Cheers.
Cheers, Chris. Iechyd da. And there's much more confusion in the town this weekend as they celebrate food and drink with the Conwy Feast. That's it for this week from me, Rachel Garside, and the Country Focus team. Thank you for your company.
You're listening to BBC Radio Wales. Time now for this morning's celebration service, which is led by the Reverend Chris Dearden.
Good morning and a very warm welcome to our worship today, which comes from St Dennis Church in Lisvane. The village of Lisvane lies just 5 miles to the north of Cardiff, but despite its proximity to the city centre, it has very much a rural feel about it and an identity all of its own. There's been a church on St Dennis's site for well over 1,000 years, possibly from as early as the 6th century. Today it's home to a thriving Christian community, and its services cater for a wide variety of ages and worship styles, so there really is something for everyone.